Hey everybody, and welcome to the third episode of my podcast, Between Throws, where I try to dive a little deeper into how jugglers think, what makes them tick, how juggling affects their lives, how their lives affect their juggling, all that good stuff. And today I'm interviewing Santi Malabari, who is a professional juggler from Mexico and has been around in the juggling scene for quite a while and has made a name for himself over that time. Before we jump in, I just want to take a second and thank you all for listening. This is the third episode, and it means a lot to me that you're still here. The response has just been great, so thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy this episode as well. I'd also like to thank everyone over on my Patreon and on the Juggler's Guide for their support. It really does make this possible, as well as all of my other content on YouTube, and I really appreciate it. So thank you so much to all of you. If you want to show some extra support, please head over to patreon.com/TaylorTries or jugglersguide.com. And you can become a member on either of those sources, and that will help support this podcast. I'm also happy to announce that this episode, as well as future episodes, should have subtitles available on the YouTube video in both English and Spanish. The Spanish translation takes a little longer, so please be patient. All right, without further ado, let's get into episode 3 of Between Throws with Santi Malabari.
Of course, you have to have discipline and work, but I made my main point in juggling to have fun. If it's not fun, it's not worth it.
Santi!
Hey!
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being on it. It's so exciting. I really appreciate you jumping on, especially because I know you're busy and you have work and you have to go to rehearsal right after this.
Yeah. Well, it's the Caribbean Showtime life.
Yeah.
Show business life.
Yeah, it's really inspiring that you've made juggling your career, and we'll talk about that. And your story is so interesting, how you got into juggling, and it's almost like you stumbled into it and it just kept paying off, and it's so cool.
Yeah, it was one of these lucky strokes of life, and I've been really grateful for that.
Aw. Well, if anyone is unfamiliar with Santi, he's pretty much a legend in many ways, both in like Mexican juggling culture and worldwide, with a lot of the innovative style that you sort of brought to juggling and incorporating contact, and then helping build a really great culture in Mexico that shifted when you started kind of joining the scene. And do you want to just give a quick intro of like what you do and who you are?
Well, I'm Santi Malabari. I'm a juggler from Mexico. I've been juggling for like 21 years now, and I love juggling. That's like the main thing. So I've been doing it nonstop. I don't practice as much as I used to, but I still do it every day. And I got to live doing juggling shows, so life's good.
Yeah, and now you perform every day pretty much, right?
Yeah. I made that change. And it's weird because for many years I was like this contemporary style juggler, like living off a few shows, but more like going into conventions and asking for funds from the state to do my shows, develop artistically more in a contemporary style. And a few years ago, I got to the Maya Riviera and start doing like way more show business style. And it was really weird for me at the beginning. I had to change a lot of my performance. There's things I like and there's things I don't like, but it's been a really good experience, and especially because I get to do my show every day and I'm learning a lot of the stage work.
That's so cool. Yeah, I want to talk about that more in a little bit. One of my favorite things about you is just like your journey into juggling and how you started. I think you dropped out of high school to like be a skateboarder, right?
Yeah, exactly. I dropped out of high school to be a skateboarder, but I like had a little, not a little, a big injury on my ankle. So I had to quit skateboarding, and I was like really depressed and not doing much. But a cousin from mine got to my house from a vacation, he was living in Chile, and he just recently learned how to juggle because he went to a circus convention by chance.
Yeah, and Chile has a lot of juggling, right? Like it's
Yeah,
so
at that point already had like a really big movement, and he went to the convention and he was like, "Oh, look what I learned," and he was juggling, and I was like, "Wow!" And he told me stories about the convention he went, like, "Oh, there were people juggling 7 balls and doing unicycles," and I was like, "Oh, wow!" And it surprised me a lot because I thought juggling was an art or a technique that can only be learned if you were from a circus family
right.
or if you were born into that world. Like he taught me, and in a couple hours I was like kind of juggling, and I was super stoked. Like, what? I'm really doing this. I didn't thought it could be learned that easy. So that motivated me a lot. So I start juggling a lot, but without any information because this was way before the internet and
Yeah.
YouTube. And for example, I thought I invented one up to up and kind of did because I never saw it
Right.
before, but I like,
I think everybody has that experience where they like invent a trick and then they realize juggling is really big. And then
yeah. I started doing it. My cousin returned to Chile and he kind of stopped juggling. But for me, it was like, no, I kept doing it. I kept doing it. So I finally started meeting the few people that did juggling in Mexico at that time, and getting information was super hard. But the turning point for me was finding the Charles Dancy
yeah.
Encyclopedia of Ball Juggling book.
Fantastic book.
That's the Bible right there. For me, it was like totally a game changer, and I'm forever grateful to Charles Dancy because it was so clear and so joyful. Also, because
Yeah.
then I got another books, but I don't know. This got to me like the joy of juggling, if you know what I mean. Like it was like super clear, but also super fun, and I read it nonstop. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna learn a trick from this book every day, and that was my mission. Like when I got it.
And at the time you were working at like a skate shop.
I was working at the skate shop from a friend, so I could juggle. That's what I did there. I juggled all day in the shop. Actually, that's how I start meeting people from juggling because a friend told me like, oh, I didn't know you juggle. They have a shop right next to my house. And I was like, a juggling shop? What's that? So I went there. I bought my first set of gloves and rings. One funny thing, it's at first I hated gloves. Like, yeah, I've been juggling for a year maybe when I got my first gloves. And I was like, oh, this is going to be easy. I'm going to do all the things I'm doing with balls with gloves. And when I got there, I was like, wow, this is difficult. So at first gloves were like, I don't know. I
That's
like
how I
balls
still feel
more.
about clubs. I still like balls more. But yeah, now you've gone super innovative with clubs and stuff. And
Now it's my thing. Like now, 3 clubs is my favorite. If I went to a deserted island, I will take 3 clubs. You can only take one thing. Okay, I'm gonna take 3 clubs.
aw, that's awesome. Aw. Coming from skateboarding, do you feel like you learned something from skateboarding that you then applied to juggling, or did skateboarding, is it similar?
Yeah, it's really similar. I think skateboarding is kind of foot juggling. If you wanna,
Yeah.
we can start that skateboarding. It's not juggling thing.
Oh no.
No, but it kind of is an object manipulation with feet, and it requires, I think, like the same kind of obsessive compulsive approach into like practicing like many hours,
Doing the same thing over and over again.
repeating without much success, like starting to take the small
Wins.
getting better.
Yeah.
Yeah, the small wins, and at some point it starts getting easier, and it's a wonderful sensation. Like So it's very similar in that way. And when I started, juggling was filling the hole that skateboarding left, because what I really liked it was being in the street with friends, doing creative stuff and motivating each other. Like, oh, I'm gonna try this, and yeah,
Hmm.
I tried to bring that approach to juggling because I didn't feel it much when I started. At least for me, skateboarding was like a group thing where everybody was cheering each other up. It didn't matter much the level you had. Like, if you knew your friend was trying that, even if it was easier for you, when you see him succeed, like everybody was like, yeah, you did. So I tried to bring that to circus where I didn't see it happening that much.
Because in Mexico at the time, it was very like traditional and sort of like what you were talking about, very kind of circus family based. Like it wasn't so much of like a street culture that it has now, right?
No, no, not at all. I'm not from the first generation of these contemporary jugglers, but maybe from the second. So there was already a little group that did this kind of juggling, but I don't know, maybe 10, 20 people most.
And it seems now, when I went to Mexico, the culture is very much like what you were describing, this kind of skateboard like street style, very like, yeah, let's do it, let's try it, very supportive than a lot of places I've seen.
Well, that's great. Like, if that's the way it developed, it's great, because
Yeah.
I think it's one of the most important things for the culture to grow.
Yeah, that's so great.
It also influenced me a lot in the video making
Yeah,
thing,
I was going to ask you about this.
because for skateboarders, parts are really important, and everybody dreams about having a part in the video. So when YouTube started, like, for me, I took a lot from skateboarding to want to make videos and have a part. Like,
It's hard for people to really know like that culture around YouTube at the time when it first started. Nobody really knew what it was and how we were supposed to use it. And I think, yeah, people who weren't around at that time don't maybe know how skateboarding did have such a video culture. It was part of what made it so cool and so like, you know, accessible in a way, but it also kind of celebrities. Do you think that's one of the main reasons why you did start making videos on YouTube?
yes, I think it was a big influence, like the skateboard culture of waiting for the video and having the information. For us in Mexico was really, really hard to get the information about skating, like it was with juggling later, but it was like one had a VHS tape and
Yeah.
and you saw it like 1,000 times. You knew the video front to back, and you saw it many, many, many times. So yeah, I always wanted that when I was skateboarding. I had a little part in a video we did in Mexico City for skateboarding.
Really?
I would love to, yeah, I would love to get it, but nobody has it.
Dang.
Yeah, then I went to Europe for the first time in 2008. We filmed a little video with the club on the head with Declan and Jordan, and it went really well. And I was like, I'm gonna film a video when I get back to Mexico, and that was the project from Seaside Manipulation, which was my first video.
Not only your first video, but it really took off. Like at the time, it was a big video, like 30,000 views or something very quickly.
It was crazy. It was like for me and also an eye opener. Like, oh wow, you can really reach people with this YouTube. Like, my goal with that video is like, if I get 1,000 views, this is a huge success for me. Like, and I had it like almost the first or second day with 1,000 views. So it was like, whoa, what's happening? It was really, really great for me, that video. It helped me a lot in my career.
Today, video is so common and there's so much like competition with it. I find a lot of people who are really insecure about wanting to even post on the internet. Like they think they're not good enough, or they think people are going to make fun of them or something. Do you think that you would have had the motivation to make that video today, to post Seaside Manipulation?
Yeah, I think so, because obviously I wanted people to see it and everything, but mainly I did it for me.
Good.
Like
Yeah.
I always wanted my skateboarding part, and now that I was a juggler, I wanted my juggling part.
And this was after you had gone to Europe, because I remember you said that when you first went to your first European juggling convention, you thought maybe you were actually really bad and like people were going to be so much better than you, but you were actually quite unique and good and kind of stood out, right?
Yeah, I didn't thought I was gonna be bad, but definitely I thought that most likely I wouldn't stand up. Or so when people start approaching me and telling the, oh, I love your juggling, it's really cool, and yeah, it was kind of a surprise. It happened to me when I went to South America a couple years before. I was like, oh, I'm gonna be just like learning, but also people like approach and like my juggling. So I was like, I'm good at this.
Well, yeah. And part of what really made you stand out and still does was your incorporation of like contact stuff. We talked about the club on the head, which you were one of the first people to do that, right?
The club on the head, yeah, I was the first along with Declan me. We were the first two.
Because people had been doing the ball on the head, and then you thought, well, we could do it with a club.
Yeah, well, I think the first ball on the head was Rastelli or even before.
Long time ago.
We had like this group of friends we were living in Berlin at the time. While I was visiting, they were living there. And it was Declan, Darag, a group of Irish people. And we were like with the ball on the head all the time, like trying new things, running, swimming, doing everything with the ball on the head. And having this discussion about if it was possible to do it with the club. And it was mainly, no, it's not possible because, yeah. And at the Berlin convention, Jordan had this special made play club.
Right. Had like sand in it. It was like a Russian club, right?
Like a Russian club. So we start trying with those, and it worked. It kind of worked, and it was like, oh, maybe it's possible with the regular. So we start trying with the regular, and it worked. After having that sensation with the Russian, it worked with the regular, and yeah, as far as I know, that's the first club on the head ever.
Yeah, and now it's still not common because it's so hard. I think at least. It feels hard to me. I don't know if people are listening and they haven't tried even just like a ball on the head. It's a bizarre feeling. I tried it a couple of times and just couldn't understand it at all.
It's a lot of patience. And the club on the head, it's like that 10 times.
It's just so much harder. Because I think it's interesting that a lot of jugglers that I meet that are into traditional sort of toss juggling stuff, a lot of them maybe start in contact or they start in swinging, like club spinning, poi or something. And then they sort of get into toss juggling, into numbers and things like that. But you started exploring like contact pretty early on in your juggling, right?
Yeah, well, I did contact before. I want to give super huge props to Tavo. He was a guy from Argentina, and he was the first one I really saw doing this like mixed contact and jogging style. I learned a lot from him. He was a really good friend. And then I started working with that a lot. I did contact before, but I never thought about mixing it a lot with the juggling. And then I saw him and I was like, wow, this is really cool.
Was that what motivated you to like explore contact? Was mixing it with toss?
Yeah, that was one of my biggest like inspirations to do it. But he did it like in a really, I don't know how to say, natural way. He was just really free with it. And I took it and give it a more nerdy approach. Maybe like I was like, oh, this roll it's a 3, and this roll you're doing here, it's a 4. And like, and that helped me a lot to develop the style, to get to much more new things quicker.
Yeah, you've talked a bit about how like site swap, which is typically sort of associated with numbers juggling and sort of the traditional stand still and do high numbers. And you've talked about how that helps you so much in your creativity with like lower numbers and contact stuff. Do you still use that like as a tool?
Always that for me it's like the best tool, and that's why I think I can create stuff easily, because I just take I'm like, oh, I want a new trick, okay, I'm gonna take this side swap and I'm gonna work with it, like, and I take a low number side swaps and I start working with the substitutions of the numbers. Okay, there's a 3 here. What moves I do with contact that can be a 3? What moves I do with contact that can be a 4 or a 2? Or
Yeah.
it becomes way easier to create that if you want to just like figure out the trick, like imagine it from scratch.
Well, and I find it interesting because contact juggling is typically usually described as sort of like going from balance point to balance point, right? Like maybe it's here to here to here, and you're sort of transitioning between different stall points.
Yeah.
But you've taken like that idea of contact, but now it's no longer about those balance points, right? It's almost like you're making it a throw, which is a different way of thinking about it.
Yeah, but it still works under the same premise. Like the movement, it's going from, let's say, point A, which is the hand, to point B, to point A back again. But then how long in side swap beats does it take to do that? So it still is like the technique of going between balance points, but also taking into account how long does it take on side swap beats to get there.
Yeah. Do you tend to think about like, if you're doing a roll up the arm and it's sort of stalling and coming back down, are you thinking about that stall point, or is it just a continuous thing that you're thinking of it as a throw sort of?
No. Now it's just a continuous thing. But when I start working on getting there to that point, of course I thought about like
you have to learn the
to the
technique.
point. Yeah. It's stall it. Yeah. You have to have the technique down, and then you can flow it.
Do you think the way that you have to approach learning contact juggling is different from toss juggling, or do you think that there's like it attracts a certain type of person or something you need for contact that you don't need for toss? Or
Yeah, I think, and well, that's my experience, and that's what I've seen when teaching it. Like, you need an extra bit of patience.
Yeah.
That even more than from juggling. And but that's because in juggling, if you take maybe a 2-hour class, like, even if you don't learn how to properly juggle, you can see many things that are getting better. Like, oh, in my first 20 minutes, I couldn't throw behind the back and catch it, but then I could, and you see little progress.
Yeah.
And in contact, it's much slower. So you can do it maybe for a week, and it's like, oh, I'm not getting anywhere. So many people like quit there.
I've tried to learn contact, and I can do more than a lot of people, but to me, it is, I describe it often as one of the hardest types of juggling because it does take so much patience and there's not as much feedback. It's so much more feeling. It's harder to analyze. There's not as many elements to it that are easy to see. A lot of it's feeling and like really small adjustments that are just hard.
And yeah, I think the wall, if you could say it like that, like the wall is higher. Like, it's harder to see over the wall. Like, what's the? But when you get over the wall, like it's really satisfying, and then you become a contact juggler forever. But yeah, it's really easy to quit before climbing the wall because you really can't see where are you going, where this is taking you. You feel like you're not making progress, even
There's a lot of
if
trust.
you are.
Yeah. Did you like approach learning contact as just I'm learning contact stuff and then I'll incorporate it into juggling, or did you like literally practice it as you were, the patterns that incorporated into tossing, or did you just spend time doing contact stuff by itself?
Oh, I did many years of contact by itself before starting incorporating into juggling. Like I started learning it as a different technique.
Do you think that helped? Is that you would recommend that?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
What about with clubs? contact club now is like very common, and not just, like fishtails and stuff, but just this style of sort of incorporating body contact with club juggling has become huge, especially
It's
in
huge, right?
Central and South America, for sure.
It's even bigger now than throwing. Like
Yeah.
it's weird at some level because I don't know, balances and contacts on the chest was something that in my time and or when I was learning was one of the last tricks. Like if you could throw perfectly behind the back and reverse, you learn all the basics first, and then like you learn the difficult ones or the crazy ones, the contact ones, and now it's like the opposite. Like people
Yeah.
learn this first, like before learning how to throw under the leg or behind the back,
Or even like ball patterns sometimes.
which is crazy for me. Like,
Yeah. And I really do think that like Central and South America has a big part in that. Like it seems like it flourished in places like Chile and Mexico, and then it just
Argentina,
sort of spread.
yeah.
And, yes, also Europe in certain ways, but the style that there is this kind of style now that just feels very, South and Central American, that it's just spread all over, and it's really neat. How has it been seeing that change over time? Like, did it feel like it happened pretty quick, or was it like gradual?
It felt like a progress. Like yeah, but it's been that way for a few years now.
Yeah, it's definitely the cool way to juggle now.
Yeah, in Mexico it's predominant. Like 3 clubs, it's the main thing for sure.
Real quick on, because I don't do a lot of contact. I've always been curious, as somebody who's very proficient in both balls contact and club contact, do they feel really different to you? Do you approach them differently?
Yeah, it helps doing contact with both to get the contact with clubs, but I think it has to do with what you start with. I know people that do contact with clubs that never tried with balls, and balls are hard for them.
Yeah, that's true.
Even if for me, it's way, way, way easier to do with clubs. For me, it was a process of having to convert. Like, for example, this 4-2-3 with the balls, it took me like a couple years to change it to clubs. And then like 5 more to get the cascade going with the clubs. So yeah, for me, it's way harder, especially when you put more objects into it, because they have way more space.
Yeah.
They're bigger, so they're easy to collide, and yet they're not like perfectly balanced. So you have to learn where you want the club to roll and everything. Yeah, for me, it's harder with clubs.
Do you approach them at least in a similar way?
Yeah, I approach in a similar way. It's just way harder for me.
Yeah. An interesting thing about you is that you really did go very hard on learning sort of traditional intense juggling, right? You did that for a while.
I did it when I started. Like, I think everybody, well, maybe not now, because
Yeah,
the cool
not now.
stuff, it's like the contact, but before it's like, oh, okay, what's really cool is to juggle 5 clubs and 7 balls, which was kind of the limit in our minds at the time. Like,
Yeah.
okay, 7 balls, cool, like 5 clubs. And now it's like, oh, I'm going to do 8 clubs. And no, but then that was enough, and I got really into it, but it wasn't as satisfying for me as creating with 3 objects. And
You said that it made you like angry a lot.
it's a kind of training that it takes a lot out of you, like, and sometimes it's better and sometimes it isn't working as well as it did the day before, and I was getting frustrated, and I saw myself like doing stuff that I was like, why I'm getting mad and throwing out that stuff, like and I was like, no, I don't juggle for this. I started juggling to have fun, and I'm not gonna force myself doing something that doesn't make me happy. So of course I like to juggle 5 clubs, but at some point in technical juggling, you have to put many hours to just like do like little increments.
It's exhausting.
So yeah, it's exhausting. And
How did you approach changing directions? You knew that, okay, this was making me unhappy, kind of angry. How did you approach then changing it and making it a more positive experience?
I approached it like from a child's mentality. It was like a mantra. Okay, I have to be like a child getting to know juggling, like playing with it, like having fun. If it's not fun, it's not worth it. Like, of course, you have to have discipline and work, but I made my main point in juggling to have fun.
And you found that more in like exploring creativity and...
Yeah, and I found it in doing whatever I was feeling like, because before that I had like a really strict training method. Like, okay, I'm gonna juggle 3 hours balls and 4 hours clubs and 2 hours contact, and I did it like religiously. It didn't matter. Sometimes I was like, oh, my arm's hurting, but I still have 2 hours more of clubs. So I was getting injured and not really listening to my body and to my mind. So I started doing that. I made that my focus in changing. Like, okay, listen to your body, listen to your heart, listen to your mind. And if you feel like juggling 5 clubs, it's cool. But if you feel like juggling 3 or 1 or not juggling or resting, listen to yourself.
So your original, or back then, your practices were really rigid and you had to do this much of this and this much of that. How did that change in terms of, how did you know what you were feeling interested in? Or did it just occur to you like, well, I kind of want to juggle 3 clubs? Or I think a lot of people have a hard time even knowing what they might like to practice.
Well, I never thought about it, because from that point, it felt like really natural. Like, oh, I'm working on this trick and I can...
You just had things that were interesting to you.
Yeah, I had a lot of things that were interesting to me. I started getting more into dance also.
Oh.
I'm not a really good dancer, but I took some contemporary lessons, and I started doing more like impro with music and trying some tricks and then some impro, and it made me happier.
That's why you're so good at Battle Night now.
yeah, I love that format also. Like,
yeah, which started. Did it start in Mexico? It did, right?
It did, yeah, in the pandemic.
So cool.
I had the idea for a long time of doing like this kind of freestyle battles, but Tinoco started it and on the pandemic in a Zoom group, and then it took off, and
now it's all over the world and in person. Yeah.
The first time we did it in person, it was great.
Yeah, it's a great atmosphere. I love it.
Yeah.
It's really nice. I think a lot of people have that experience where they sort of, when it gets super hard, and it's not that it's hard and people don't want to continue because they're lazy or something, but it changes the way that it feels. And for some people, they thrive on that. And some people, like I had the same thing where it just became less fun. But I personally struggle with even trying to figure out what part of it is fun for me. So I'm really intrigued as to how you were able to shift so well. And but I like that idea of approaching it like a kid. Do you think that the that fundamental that you had of sort of that technique before you transitioned to that, do you think that was helpful in the stuff that you do now?
Yeah, definitely. And maybe it would have been more helpful if I didn't quit completely, because when I first made the change, like I completely changed. Always 3 clubs, 3 balls. Like I wasn't feeling much like into 5 clubs. So my number juggling is still like not so good. But of course, everything I did on technique helped me then to creativity. Because if you have solid background on technique, you can create much more things. Like if you don't have tools to create, you can have awesome ideas, but you don't have the technique to make them work. It's getting a balance between having technique and having creativity and having fun. And you have to juggle that as well.
It seems like balance is a lot more important to you now, in terms of, you've talked about just even like listening to your body. And I know you struggled with injuries a lot with skateboarding and then some with juggling as well. And
Yeah.
Like, because you used to practice so much, right?
I'm very obsessive. So when I start juggling and getting better and getting motivated, I was juggling like maybe 10 hours a day.
So much.
I was younger, so I wasn't thinking clearly about doing conditioning from the body, stretching, warming up, and those things are really important. You just don't see it sometimes when you're younger. Like I was like, okay, I'm juggle 10 hours, I'm gonna do a warm up. And it was like, okay, I'm ready. Yeah, I'm ready. If you want to do like extreme trainings, you can't do it like that. You have to stretch and do conditioning for your body.
Yeah, especially just, I think people, when they're younger, they think they don't need it and they'll maybe realize it when they do. But in reality, a lot of the time you realize it when it's too late. Like you'll realize it when you get hurt and then you wish that you had done that. So it's better to prevent it ahead of time.
Yeah. Yeah, I in my classes or when I have younger students or just people that come to me for advice, like it's always like stretch, start now. You don't think you need it now, but you need it.
Yeah.
Like you don't feel you need it, but you need it.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things I'm really interested in is how you very early on, you made it an effort and like a point to try to travel for juggling. Like you said, I know you took like 2 years or something from your life and just traveled.
It's because the thing we were talking before, like there was almost no information online. I had a few videos in a USB, like some juggler came and I have these videos and there wasn't like really much information around. And it was great at some level. Like you had to go find the jugglers and to find the tricks. You heard the stories like, oh, there's a guy in this park that does this trick. So you had to go to that park, find the guy, and
it's like a legend.
Yeah.
I hear there's a guy in a park that can do this trick.
It sounds funny now, but it was exactly that. Like some people came back from Argentina. Oh, I saw this guy in this park doing this. And everyone was like, no,
no way.
No, not really. No way. So you had to go find it. And yeah.
So like say that it was now and you could just kind of get that influence from the internet. Do you think there was something else you got from the traveling part that influenced the way you juggle and being there in person?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course. I don't know if that much on the way I juggle, but as a person, like traveling and knowing different cultures, it's a changer for your personality. And I was mainly, how can we say, like traveling for juggling, but of course I made lots of friends. I knew so many beautiful places, and maybe now I could have learned the tricks from the internet, but the experience of traveling, it's way different. Also the conventions, because conventions are a really important part of that. And
I know that the Circunvención Mexicana had already existed, right? Like, or it had just started when you found it.
Yeah, I wasn't a part of the organization. I already juggled when the first convention happened, but I wasn't part of the organizing team or anything. But then I start getting more involved in the process of making the conventions happen, and I being the main organizer twice.
What made you want to help do that? A lot of people go to conventions, not a lot of people actually participate in helping them grow and run, you know?
Yeah. To be completely truthful, it's not something that I enjoy a lot, like because every time stressful. I do it, yeah, it's super stressful. And also, well, you saw it, the last convention you went in Mexico. There was a lot of friends, you included. And I was like, I wanted to juggle with everybody. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to juggle 5 minutes here. And the radio is like, oh, we need something on the 10. Yeah. So you don't really get to enjoy the convention as a juggler. It's a different satisfaction, but it's more like when it ends and everything went right, and people, it's like, oh, this convention was really good, thanks. Like you feel a certain kind of satisfaction, but it's also frustrating at times. Like,
yeah.
I can juggle. All my friends from all around the world are here, and I want to juggle with them, and I can't. It's like, oh,
I think it's something people just don't appreciate a lot. Like next time, if anyone listening goes to a convention, just pay attention to the people who are running around, not juggling,
yeah.
doing the behind the scenes, because they often just don't get to do anything. They're making sure you get to have a good time, and it is kind of a thankless job in a lot of ways. You don't get to do the one thing you often want to do.
Yeah, it's really hard, and that's why I always like recommend people like organize little events. Like it doesn't have to be a big convention. Just organize like a one day get together without camping or anything, and you start seeing that it's not easy.
Yeah.
To get money, people always it's gonna be complaining like, oh, why didn't bring that, or the place is too small. Oh, it's too hot. Or yeah, there's always like a lot of critique, but it's really hard to do.
Well, and in the time of the internet, though, do you feel like it is important that we prioritize going to conventions and doing meetups in person? Like, do you think you get something from that you don't get otherwise?
For me, it's my favorite place. Like convention time, it's my favorite time, and I wouldn't change it for anything. Yeah, go to a convention. Go to every convention you can. For me,
it's also just great. You probably have seen this from how many you've been to, but you know the ones I've been to. It's so cool to see the way that a convention is run and the way it's sort of set up. Also changes depending on the culture of the country that it's in, even, which is really the Mexican juggling convention is very different even than the European juggling convention, which it's arguably similar to, but it's even then very different. It's certainly very different than a lot of American conventions. So it's kind of neat to get to see.
Yeah, every country, every convention is different. That's why I love to go to the most I can.
Yeah. So one thing that is just interesting about you is you sort of fell into performing. You know, you didn't go to like a circus school to try to learn how to perform. You got offered a job very quickly to sort of do some performing, and then you got roped into performing at the EJC or something, right?
It was weird. Like at the beginning when I started juggling, I got offered like a job juggling, but it was, I don't know how you say it, like
strolling gig.
Yeah, the strolling things, and I was like, "Oh, this is really cool! I can get paid."
It's most people's first juggling job.
I like it because I was getting paid more, like much more than working in the shop for way less time. But I wasn't really into performing. I wasn't like, "Oh yeah," I didn't like getting painted, or like I wasn't really into performing at all when I started. For me, it was like the change from skateboarding to juggling, and I enjoyed a lot like doing videos and showing people my tricks, but I wasn't enjoying like this whole makeup and picture music and everybody's wanna watch you now. No, so for many years I didn't perform, and I start getting better, and people start like asking me to perform. Like, we want to see your act. Like, I know I don't like to perform. I don't have an act. Like, and I'm super thankful to Leo and Andrea from Circo de Mente because they forced me. Like, there was going to be the Mexican convention, the Circunvención Mexicana. I think it was the third edition. And there was a pre-convention gala. And they were like, okay, you're performing there. You're already in the flyer. So do as you wish, but you're there. Like, and I was like, no. I was scared, but now I'm really grateful they forced me, because that's where I made my first act. And I performed. I did okay. I enjoyed it, kind of. Like, it felt weird, but at the same time, at the end, when everybody was clapping and giving me their energy, it's like, oh, this feels kind of good. But still, it wasn't my thing. And then it was this trip to Europe. Some girl saw me doing contact in the park, and it's like, oh, do you have an act? And I was like, yeah, I have one, because we're organizing the Polish convention, and maybe you can go there performing the gala. And I was like, oh, yeah. And I performed there. And then I went to the Sardinian convention, And it was like, oh, you sent your video to perform, right? And I was like, no, but you're this guy with the orange balls. And I was like, yeah, well, somebody sent your video. That's one thing I still don't know what happened there.
Somebody mysterious.
Yeah, they had my video, so I ended up performing there too. And then people from that organization were organizing the EJC Latin Gala, and they were like, "Oh, we need you to be there because there's a lot of people from these countries, but you're the only one from Mexico, so you'll be there." And I was like super nervous. Like at this point, I had performed like maybe 5 times in my life.
Wow.
So my first performances were all like EJC Latin Gala from the Polish Convention, Gala from the Circunvención Mexicana. So I started heavy, like with a lot of pressure.
Because like, juggling in Mexico wasn't really big yet. Did you ever feel like pressure to sort of represent Mexican juggling? And
not really. I felt more the pressure on myself than on representing a country. I never been that much of a nationalist. Like, I love being from Mexico, but I'm not like, Mexican pride or anything like that. Like, it was much more the pressure on me, and it was heavy. Like, for example, on the EJC, I was performing my contact act, was the act I had at the time, and before my turn, I was shaking completely, like this. And I was gonna do contact. I always do a little bit of contact before the show, and I couldn't do anything. I was really worried. I'm up on stage in 5 minutes and I can't stop shaking. What I'm gonna do? I'm gonna make a fool of myself, like, I'm not gonna do the first trick of the iron. I was like, what's happening? So I had like, okay, I'm not gonna practice anymore. I'm just gonna have to breathe. I start breathing slowly, having this mantra of like, have fun, just enjoy the moment, whatever happens, happens. And it happened. Like when I got into stage, I calmed down, and it always been like that for me from that time on. Of course, every time I get less nervous, but I'm always much more nervous before going into stage that when I'm actually on stage, I get much more relaxed.
I'm the same way. I don't like performing much, but there's just like a panic beforehand. And then once it happens, it's sort of like autopilot and you just feel it and go with it. And now you perform all the time, but like you said, it's a little different.
Yeah, and it changed a lot. It has taught me a lot about working with crowds. And because before I did these performances, but it was always like for jugglers. My main focus was on creating something for people that did the same and understand what's going on. So when I start coming into the Caribbean, I start coming here giving workshops, which is my favorite thing to do, much more than performing. But they start offering me like, oh, you want to go to this hotel and perform? And I was like, oh, sure. And I went there and did my 6-minute trick club act. And they were like, oh, it was pretty, but here we need something. Could you do like 3, 4, 5 balls, and then you take that and 3, 4, 5 clubs and more energy and running? And at the base, I'm like, no, not my thing. I don't want to. But then I started doing it and I got the hang of it, and I started enjoying it for what it is. But before, it's like, oh, I don't want for people to go crazy because I throw a club really high or because I juggle really fast, like that's not hard, And I kind of like get angry, but it's ridiculous. And I enjoy a lot knowing what to do for each different audience.
And it's mostly at like resorts. Is it mostly American people that come to these resorts? Or like,
yeah. A lot of people from the US, some Europeans, Canadians, but the main audience, it's from the US.
It's so funny to me too, because in the US, we do have like more and more smaller circuses popping up, but it is one of the countries that I think it's harder to be sort of a juggler in or at least a lot of opportunities, they tend to be a little different. But it's funny that the American audience is the one that goes to Mexico for that. Most people would never go to like a juggling show here just for fun, but they will do it when they're on vacation. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, because they have everything in the hotel. Like the hotel has like, okay, we want the guest to go out as little as possible. So they got
everything.
like lots of everything, different shows every night. So there's the circus show, the fire show, the dance show, the break. Yeah.
It's good that they provide jobs too for circus artists and jugglers.
Yeah, and it has helped me a lot with this, like, because in the past 3-4 years, I've done like, I don't know, I'll say maybe 1,500 shows. Yeah, and the 17 years before that I juggled, I did like 50.
That's so funny. That's a good way to get very good at it very quickly.
Yeah, and to fight the nerve, like now it's like I'm relaxing before my act, like it's okay, 5 minutes, I warm up a little and then go.
That's great. It's good to have that confidence too. You mentioned that you love workshops. I'm the same way. I love teaching. It's like my favorite thing about conventions and meetups and stuff. It seems like you've always had this sort of love of sharing juggling. Like you even said that when you learned it, you immediately wanted to teach everyone around you, your parents, your friends. I mean, you probably are like this with things in your life in general, but what about it makes you want to share it with everybody?
That's a really good question, and I'm not sure about it. Like I like the that's a hard question. I don't know why I like it so much. I enjoy it a lot. Maybe because I think I'm good at it. So I enjoy a lot of people having these moments that I had, like when I learned it, and I was like, oh, I never thought I could learn it so easy. Like many people come to the workshop like that, like, oh, I came, but I can't. I'm really bad at it. And then seeing the change when they realize it's not that hard or they can do it, or I enjoyed it a lot.
I get the same, because juggling gives you like a dopamine hit. You get excited when you get it and whatever, and you think that you couldn't do it. And there's something nice about making that possible for somebody else, right?
Yeah, and I also enjoy a lot when teaching advanced stuff. I like both things. Like I like teaching basic stuff and creating new jugglers, and I also like to develop already existing jugglers with harder stuff and all the nerdy stuff I love. And so I have lots of things to teach, and I love it.
Yeah, it seems like you have a genuine like love for juggling and you want to share it. And it, even when one of the things that stood out to me is when you talk about the Encyclopedia of Ball Juggling and you describe how, not only were the tricks and stuff so exciting, but you felt like you could feel Charlie Dancy's excitement. And it seems it's so interesting that you like pick up on that. And that is, I feel like a lot of people would read that and not really feel that excitement the way that you did. And it makes sense that then you go out and try to do the same thing for other people.
That's really important. Like I was going to tell that for me, like it's also like a kind of thanks to Charles Dancy, like who did that for me. He did that for me. So I want to do that for somebody else. Like maybe from 1,000 people that I teach juggling, it can change one life, like mine changed. So yeah.
Oh, that's really sweet. Well, one of the questions that I have been asking that I haven't asked you yet is sort of, it's kind of a boring question, but I want you to be very honest about it and just what it actually is like, how do you personally define juggling, or what is juggling actually to you? And I don't want like the political answer. When you hear juggling or you think of juggling, what does that actually mean to you? It's a hard question.
It's when somebody says juggling, I think on my life, on everything I do. I think on most the techniques, but I don't find it very interesting, or it's not really for me, like having definitions and fights and juggling. It's whatever. It's okay. I can picture juggling, and if somebody didn't know anything about juggling, I could explain like, oh yeah, it's throwing things into there, manipulating objects, but I don't pay much attention to that. Like, for example, when I perform my contact act in a traditional circus tent, one of the guys came like, it was really good, but that's not juggling. I was like, okay. But he was expecting for me to like, no, it is juggling, like it. And I was like, oh, okay. And he was like, no, but it's not juggling. And I was like, oh, but did you enjoy it? I was like, oh yeah, it was good. Like, and so for me, it's all right. Like, it can be juggling. It's even better for me if you can like describe it, because I was like, if it wasn't juggling, what was it? And you're like, I don't know, but it's not juggling. Okay, it's even better for me if it's not juggling and you can describe it, but you enjoyed it. So I'm not like much into having like, okay, this is juggling and this, because I don't find the necessity, or I don't know how it helped me to define like, oh, this is juggling, this is so I when I see these big discussions on the internet about what's juggling, and I like, for example, the thing that Eric and Jay are doing of defining, I find it really interesting, but it's not for me.
Yeah, that's why I love that question, because it really reveals a lot about how everyone has a different answer of what it means or what it doesn't mean, or whether they define it or whether they don't. And I think it's great. So thank you.
There's also this like, what's juggling, but also like, who is a juggler?
Yeah,
and some people say like, oh no, you need to do like at least 5 objects, and I was like, no, for me, if you think you are a juggler, you are a juggler.
Yeah.
If you are a good juggler or a bad juggler, it's a different topic, and it's completely subjective on the people watching. So for me, it depends on what you think you are. If you think you're a juggler, you're a juggler, and that's it. Not like, no, you have to do like 5 objects and have 3 different techniques. So, and it's like, that's stupid for me.
I love that. I think we have similar views on it. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. The last question that I love asking is just, do you think that there is a common sort of trait that jugglers need and to become jugglers? Like something that people who become jugglers, there's something that they have that other people don't as much, or like a quality or a trait that they need.
Yeah, and patience.
Patience.
Yeah, you have to have patience to be a juggler. You have to be like kind of obsessive, dedicated. Dedication. It's also like, if you're not dedicated, I think you can't be a juggler. You need to be really dedicated and patient with your craft and to be a good juggler.
Yeah, especially past a certain point. It feels like a lot of, even, and I don't mean that like past 5 objects. I mean that just like, a lot of people kind of learn 3 and then maybe like a trick. They just don't have the motivation to keep going. And it seems like a lot of that sort of divider of people who get into juggling versus who just kind of learn for fun. It's like there's this patience.
Yeah, but it's like any other craft, like learn some easy things on the guitar, or like drawing, or any technique, but skateboarding, rollerblading, sports. No, it's easy to learn the first part, and then you need patience if you want to go to the next level.
Well, and so it takes patience to learn like guitar, for example. Do you think that there's something about juggling that, if somebody is presented juggling and a guitar, the type of person that might pick juggling over guitar? Or do you think it's probably just circumstance? Or
yeah, and the taste. I don't know. For me, juggling was is great because I love games. I love sports. This is for me like the ultimate game, ultimate sport because it never ends. It can go on forever and you can do it by yourself. And I don't know. I think juggling appeals more for people that like movement and sports and that kind of stuff over like guitar. It would be more for people like, oh, I like music more and I don't know.
Yeah.
But also something really important that juggling taught to me, it taught me how to learn, if it makes sense. Like
I say this all the time.
juggling, it's really good for learning how to learn.
Yep.
How to learn stuff. Like it happens a lot. The first thing always is you always have a mind block on, oh, I'm not good at drawing, or I was like, I'm not good at instruments, for example, and after juggling it's like, okay, I just need to get like the basic of everything and practice until the next level, and then like you learn how to break down the thing you want to learn. I think juggling teaches you a lot of that, of breaking things down to the lower levels to teach you how to learn.
Especially because it never ends. It's not like you learn juggling and then you just everything else is so much easier. It's like, if anything, it gets so much harder and you have to get better at learning as you get further into juggling. It's not like, learning how to shoot a basketball and then once you're good at it, that skill is locked in. Juggling, every pattern, every trick is a new learning experience, and you sort of start over. You never start over, but you have to do that process again of breaking it down and figuring out what's going wrong.
And you have to learn how to analyze yourself, like what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, unless you're a Russian with your coach at the side, and you have pretty much to learn to do that yourself. Like, oh, I'm throwing this, my arms over here.
To get to a certain point, especially, like, I think early on, you don't have to be as self-aware, but as you get further in order to progress, you just have to start being more efficient. Yeah, I feel the same way. It really does teach you how to learn. And as a result, like, people always ask me, how are you so good at learning things? Like, why are you so good at everything? And it's like, juggling just kind of teaches you the tools. You just have to break down the muscles that you have to do. It's the same as juggling.
Definitely. It has helped me a lot in life also.
I think the biggest thing for me is that it gave me the confidence to know that it will get better. I think a lot of people, when they try something, it feels so hard, and there's a part of their brain that they really think they can't do it. And juggling, after 100 tricks, you start to learn that it's going to be hard, but eventually you'll learn it. And anything you try, you're like, yeah, I'll get it eventually. Not.
Yeah, it changed for me, like the perspective from I can't to I haven't practiced it enough.
Yeah.
No, it's like, oh no, I can't. I'm bad at it. Now it's like, oh, I can do it yet because I haven't practiced this enough.
Yep. People just have to trust themselves more that they'll get better. Everyone learns a different pace, but for them, practicing enough might be really long compared to maybe half that for somebody else. But they will get there. Like, most things you can learn. It's just people stop themselves.
Sure.
Yeah. This has been great. Really, really loved getting to talk to you about stuff. There's so much more we could probably talk about, but
anytime I'm for discussing juggling or more specific subjects or anything. I love juggling, and I love talking about juggling. So
same.
Anytime.
If people want to come see you perform at these resorts and stuff, where can people find more information about that?
They can ask me personally because the hotels are always changing. The shows change every time in the Riviera, but they can ask me. I'm living in Playa del Carmen, so if jugglers come visit, they can also like call and we will get together to juggle. But we work in all the Maya Rivieras, so we go from Cancun to Tulum and Playa, and there's a lot of hotels in the highway. Cool. Between those places. So we travel to different locations every day.
Are you going to any conventions coming up?
I this year I want to go to the EGC so bad.
Are you gonna go?
Hopefully, like it's on the plans. Yeah, I really want to, and I'll try it with all my heart. And if it's in my possibility, I'll go for sure.
Great. Well, if anyone is at the EJC and you want to take a workshop from Santi, go find him.
Yeah, for sure. Or just play, or just say hi, and I'm always up for juggling.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This has been great.
Thanks a lot for having me. I hope my English was all right. I sometimes I have some troubles like being fluent or expressing my idea because I have to make the translation. But I hope it was all right, and I'm super thankful with you for having me here.
No, I appreciate you doing it in English. My Spanish is terrible, so it would have been much worse that way. I think you did a great job. I really appreciate that you were willing to do this and do it in English and just take the time. I really appreciate it. Wish I got to see you sooner, hopefully soon.
Hopefully, maybe I can make it to IAA some year. Also, that would be great. Yeah. But hopefully we see each other soon.
Yep.
In a convention, or if you come visit.
Yeah, it's not that far away. I should be able to just pop down there. But unfortunately, it's the most expensive part of Mexico.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Between Throws with Santi Malabari. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, which was quite a bit. And I hope you'll join me for future interviews and future episodes. If you have an idea of somebody that you'd like interviewed on this podcast, leave me a comment. Let me know who you'd like to hear from. A big thank you again to Santi for taking time to talk to me today and take time away from all of his performing that he does. If you want to keep up with Santi's juggling, make sure you head over to Instagram.com/Santi Malabari. I'll put a link in the description of this video, so you can just head straight over there. Go show him some love and support, and check out all of the unique juggling that he's done. The Between Throws theme song is a wonderful track by the artist I love called Gem. And I've forgotten to mention the last few episodes, but the artist is actually a juggler himself, which is part of why I was so excited to use his track for our theme song. If you want to check out that track as well as his other music, you can head over to soundcloud.com. The end credit music is a track by Psy315, who also happens to be my talented brother. You can find him on Instagram at instagram.com/Psy315. Thank you again so much for listening.